Gary Kemp, wonderful to have you back here at Noise 11. Last time we were talking about a band that you may have been in.
Oh yeah.
This time we're not.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the new record getting out. A solo Gary Kemp album, This Destination.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on as well.
It's only been a couple of years since the last solo album, and then it was like 27 years between the number one and the number two. So you are accelerating. That is the good news.
Yeah, there's I felt really invigorated and inspired by playing with Nick Mason was a big thing for me as well. You know, really putting Spandau Ballet behind me in that sense as and you know, working with this guy from Pink Floyd who I have been, in fact we came to Australia with about just over a year ago.
And I was at the Forum. I saw that show.
Oh, you did? Oh, you did. Okay. And so you get to see that I can be much more expansive with my guitar playing and with my, you know, I sing as well. So all those things are added to my confidence as an upfront artist rather than the sort of sideman to Tony. And I think that inspired me also as a songwriter, because I think I found my voice much more. And yeah, so as soon as In Solo was finished, you know, a few things happened. I went on tour for quite a long time with Nick. I think we did 32 countries. And then I came straight back and I needed to write.
Yes, well, we did see the show when you were in Melbourne, and what I did notice was that you were having a lot of fun up there on stage. Obviously, that camaraderie. You've got one of your best mates standing next to you with Guy Pratt, and Guy Pratt's on this record. And when I listened to the opening track of the new record, it's Pink Floydish in style and sound, I guess, because of that experience you've been through over the last couple of years with the Nick Mason Saucerful of Secrets, and the fact that you have Guy Pratt on the record as well.
I think it's a bit of that, you know. You know, Gilmore's been a guitar hero of mine for many years, since when I was a kid. I think it's funny because I interviewed David for my podcast, Rock on Tours, which I do with Guy, and Guy was saying, "Oh, isn't this fun that you're, you know, talking to, you know, you're with David now, and given that you play a lot of his stuff on stage." I said, "Well, my sound is a combination of him and Mick Ronson, and you know, various other guitarists. Even to a certain extent, when I play, it's Nile Rodgers. So, where his references would have been Hank Marvin and Jeff Beck, and we all are a combination of these we're the DNA of all these players that we've grown up with as kids. So I think I was quite close to that. I understood it. I throw in a few Mick Ronson riffs on See Emily Play, because the first time I ever see Emily Play was on Bowie's Pinups. So
me too.
Yeah. But no, I am having a lot of fun, and I do think it's bled a bit into the album. That's, you know, that I'm allowed to make some of those sounds. It's a kind of license, really, because I think if my audience were just purely people who once followed Spandau, it would give me a very narrow license to work within. But I think it's been broadened now, and I can be a bit more explorative. I like art pop. I like 10cc. You know, I like you know, Roxy Music. I like Wings, who I can still consider art pop. You go back and listen to some of those records from the 70s, and they're very expansive. And I like the kind of complexity of lyrics of Steely Dan. So I think all of these combine and go into the album that I made really.
We're the same age. I guess we've got the same record collection. You pretty much just mouthed off my entire record collection when you said that then.
I can see most of it behind you.
Yeah, but even, you know, something like Wings, for instance, you know, like I even hear bits and pieces of that in this record. I think it might have been Take the Wheel.
Yeah.
Was that the first song you wrote for the album?
Yes, it was. It's an unusual song. It's got a film noir kind of style to it. It's quite theatrical, because I'm going to add another person into that mix of people that I love that are in my DNA. And this isn't a name dropped very often by rock musicians, and that's Sondheim, right? I love the storytelling of Sondheim, Sweeney Todd, you know, and I just think sometimes you can be a bit more adventurous if you're a solo artist. And Take the Wheel came off of me sitting at the piano one day. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and I think the world, everyone seems to be experiencing this. You know, the constant doom scrolling that we go through, but also people, when you get to a certain age, there's that sense of mortality that creeps in. Whatever it was, I think I felt lyrically I was trying to express an emotion that I had at that time, and that I said it in this film noir world where I'm the kind of private detective trying to find the nemesis, and sitting in this car with this woman that I love, and the rain's pouring and we can't see where we're going, and I'm gripping the wheel as hard as possible. That nemesis is inside me, you know, and it's so I had when I sit down to write, I often have a sense of what I'm going to write about, and I want to try and encapsulate the emotion that I'm carrying or the thoughts that I'm carrying. When I wrote Borrowed Town, that first one that was on the album that you mentioned, that was all written on an underground train. Not musically, but lyrically. I wrote that first, the lyrics first. And it's about London being in flux, this city that's forever changing. And I watch people getting on and off this train, and I'm thinking, we only own this city, or we only borrow it for a short period of time. We never own it, you know. And that became a concept. And I think London does, and the city I live in does seep into many tracks. You know, Windswept Street is set. The first verse is set on Soho, and so you know, it's part of my. You know, I'm trying to express who I am. I'm not just making up a bunch of tales that could be anybody.
When you're writing a song on a train, are you the old-fashioned guy that gets on the train with the pad and the pencil, or is this being typed into notes on the iPhone?
On the iPhone, on the iPhone. I'm going to name drop now. I was actually going to have lunch with Pete Townsend, and I'm crossing from central London to Richmond, a long way, a long journey. So he gave me time to do it, but I think it was the fact that I was having lunch with him that made me think, you know, you've got to kick yourself and you've got to keep writing, because he's one of my great inspirations. He's one of the greatest writers of lyrics, I think, in rock music ever. And and I think that's why sometimes I'm inspired to write lyrics first on a lot of the record.
So was that song completed by the time you got to the destination
All the
station?
lyrics were completed. And it sort of expresses that flux of the city, but also, where do we find home in a city like that? You know, when we're not kings of the street anymore. And I think it's in the village of the people you love, and the village of your family, and the village of this, for in my case, this woman that I love. So, um, yeah, these are ways of finding what to write about at my age.
You, as a craftsman, as a songwriter, you are uh, such an expert when it comes to melody. I'm surprised to hear that a lyric comes before the melody in this case.
Well, I enjoy that, and I think I'm at that stage where I can do that now. When I wrote for Spandau Ballet, it was always melody first, and then, oh my God, I'm kind of trapped in this melody. How do I fit the lyrics in? Where do I go? It didn't always work like that. Through the Barricades was a song I wrote probably all at once, but I'm quite good now at knowing what kind of scansion, to use a technical term, I need within a lyric that's going to accommodate a melody. Um, I do think that lyrics seem to me equally as important to the melody, but I like a good tune. You know, I mean, I think, Elton's been writing like that for years, but someone else writes the lyrics. They put the lyric on front of his piano, and he starts work. So it's completely possible to find great melody within a given lyric.
Is there a formula that you work by? Do you know a structure of a song and know that it has to fit into
Well,
these parts to be a Gary Kemp song?
well, there is an easy formula that you kind of that is, that people always, people know that the songs are verse, bridge, chorus, etc., middle eight. And you can choose to deliver your song like that. Um, and building a song is a natural instinct, really, isn't it? That's where do you go? How do you challenge the melody? How do you how do you excite the listener into this next bit, this shift in the middle eight, which tells a touch, which takes the story at a different angle? That's norm, I know that works if you do that. Um, but you must be connected to your emotions. If you start being too technical. I don't think you'll write a great song. It's got to come instinctively. And then some songs don't have that formula at all. There's a song at the end of this album called I Know Where I'm Going, which is kind of, I guess, like the folk Bob Dylan style, where you just have, a verse A and you just repeat that, but with different lyrics. And so it's horses for courses.
Some of the songs on this album, and three of them, I mean, we've got Boy in there. You actually go way back to your childhood and start to tell us about your childhood in song. I think, as we get into our 60s, we're probably more aware of where we were in our teens than, say, a 30-year-old. Is
Yeah,
that the experience you were going through with the songwriting for this record?
I try and I think, if I sat down to write a book, what would I write about it? I'd write about, the story I know. And the story I know is me growing up. And after that, it's not that interesting because it's just a guy who's very lucky in music, and maybe has some ups and downs in love. But the really great story for me was when I didn't have that money and I didn't have the success of the band, and I was a teenager beginning to meet kids on the street that would change my life. Windswept Street, 1978, is set in the first verse there, and is about when this gang of kids started to gather in Soho in London, and which famously now is called the Blitz Club, and in the whole new romantic movement, and just how it was a mixture of gay kids and straight kids and kids from leafy suburbs, kids from council estates, and how out of that, I found great inspiration, and then it flips to me going around now and looking for those ghosts. I don't think that's a totally uncommon idea. I think because it might be personal to me, but it's hopefully universal to a lot of people. Boy is about meeting one of those guys that changes your life, that introduces you to literature and to art and has huge charisma, and everyone wants to be him or her. And I had someone in mind, and I wanted to write about them. So yeah, I think it is. On the last album in solo, I wrote a song called "Waiting for the Band," which was about the experience of being a young teenager and going to see a band, and just that incredible excitement of being at the front of the stage waiting. And in my mind, it was Bowie to appear on stage. So, I think my sources are definitely my younger years.
Well, considering the fact that you seem to have had a tsunami of ideas for this record, and it coming so soon after in solo, why that long gap then, that 30-year period where
Well, it
very
wasn't quite
little
30
happened
years,
with you
was
as a songwriter?
it? That wasn't quite 30 years, was it? It was 95 the album came.
26.
95 the album came out, and I think the next one came out 2002. So well, yeah, 2022, sorry. So yeah, 20. Oh my God, yeah, it's incredible. I tell you what it was. I think when Little Bruises came out, I really loved that album. I really worked hard at it, and it was intricate, and I used a lot of Irish folk music on it and mixed it with a lot of rock music and different. And right in 1995, Britpop happened. So Oasis and Blur and Pulp. And, I was yesterday's man, and it was like for immediately kind of ignored. And I felt really quite disheartened, I think. I felt quite, it made me feel quite insecure. I then spent a lot of time doing other things, whether it's going to court with Spandau Ballet, or putting Spandau Ballet back together again, or putting it back together again, or working on the some of the DVD releases that we put out, and acting and etc. And then I think it wasn't on my mind to do. And even though I was writing often for other people, and I was not considering a solo career. And then I think it was 2018 getting together with Nick, as I said, and building confidence again as a musician and as a writer.
It must be very interesting, though. Like, I think of a time when, say those early 80s, when, I was working a lot in radio back then, and there were songs that hadn't been released yet. They were still to come, and they become part of everybody's favorite song. In the 80s, when Spandau Ballet were releasing all of those songs, were you sort of mindful of the fact that you're in the studio and you were creating something that was going to last for ever and a day?
No, of course not. No, you're only thinking, you know, well, it could, yeah. I mean, it could last a few years because, I'm in the studio in the 80s, still listening to albums that I'd bought, 10 years previously when I was a kid. And so I knew they had that much longevity, but I don't think anyone really knew how far this whole thing would last. I mean, if you think in the very beginning of my career in the 1981, I don't think there was anyone in rock music much older than 40 anywhere. So, that means, it was still a young person's thing, and I don't think we ever felt that they would last forever. Once you once a song has come out and been a hit and then goes down the charts, in my mind, as a writer for Spandau Ballet, it's finished. I've got to write the next one and think about that. And so you're really living in the present. The irony about all the music that we adore and that we carry through our lives is mostly it's written by people in their early 20s, because that's when they're having their sort of golden years. And yet they have no experience, people in their early 20s, as much as, to draw on for lyrics. And so it's, I think probably people's best writing, if you really look at an artist, even though it's not as successful, often their best writing is later on.
Yes, I went and saw the Led Zeppelin movie on the weekend, and I was absolutely gobsmacked that by the time of their second album, they were all 20 years old.
Yeah, you see? Yeah, I know. I mean, Jimmy was a prodigy, wasn't he? Obviously, he was one of the top session players in London before he even started Led Zeppelin, but he was only a kid. And we're
We've got
sitting
some
sitting
amazing
in
sound that you've been creating for this record, with thanks to Stephen Wilson. We live in a digital world now. Everything's streaming. It's very difficult to find, vinyl or CD when you want to get something.
Can't get mine
Bringing
on
in
vinyl.
Stephen Wilson to do the work on the Dolby release
Oh
for
yeah.
this record. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, you listen. I've done all formats, and when I put my ideas, my track listing together, it's always in the shape of two acts. It always in my mind ends at the end of side one on the vinyl when you flip it, and where how does side two begin? And you can get it on vinyl, obviously, um, but there, Stephen Wilson is this sort of prog rock kind of artist who's hugely intelligent, who's become almost he's almost like a boffin really in over here, and I know he's very successful as a musician in his own right, but he's also become the go-to guy to do, we'll call it surround sound, Dolby Atmos, whatever you want. Dolby Atmos is what it is, and it's a sort of 360 mixing of having the sound all around you that he does. And he's been doing remixing Yes albums and Genesis albums and Jethro Tull albums and the Who, all with the artists involved. And you can either play it through a cinema system that you might have at home, or Apple headphones, or I think, well, they do. You can stream it off your phone in that format if you want. You can flip to it, and they give you a kind of sense of it. And it was amazing to sit in his studio when I heard the playback of the album. And I mean, you can choose. You can have stereo or that. But when I sat in the playback for the Dolby Atmos, and the backing vocals appear behind you, the guitar overdubs are all clear. Each one of them is hanging separately in the air in a different place, just like baubles, and you can just like to choose to focus in on that keyboard or that guitar part or that vocal. It's an amazing way of listening to music.
And when you say something like that, I would imagine you're walking out of Abbey Road having recorded this album, but not so. Rack Studios, where some of the best pop was made in the 70s. Susie
Yeah.
Quattro, Smokey, Racy, Mud.
Hot chocolate, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Mickey Most. It was Mickey Most Studio, and he was the great pop producer of the early 70s. And it's a lovely old studio that's sort of family run. His wife took it over after he died, and she unfortunately just died recently. And but the daughter's now running it, and It's been going for years, and it's a beautiful space, a big few studios in there. I mean, Rolling Stones were in there recently, and it's a great place to work. And we did all the strings in there with a really fantastic string arranger called John Metcalf, became aware of through Peter Gabriel, and really liked his work. And he had a solo album out called Tree, and I adored that. And so I got in touch with John, and we did this. He helped do he did the string arrangements for 3 songs.
Will you tour this record?
I don't know because I don't know because I kind of have these long gaps, and I don't know what my audience is. I can't imagine a room full of ex Spandau fans and ex Pink Floyd, or Spandau fans and Pink Floyd fans coming together. I don't know. I'd love to play I'd love to go out and do some shows. I really, really would. Yeah, because that's kind of it validates the music that I do. But when I make a record, I don't think I'm thinking about playing it live. I think I'm just thinking about making the record, and I'm not constraining myself to the boundaries of like, oh, how do I reproduce this? But I'd like to. I do have some commitments that are going to be again with Nick Mason this year, which I think we're going to be going out as well. I mean, he's 81 now, but if he still wants to do it, then I'm really up for it.
Well, I think we've got Bob Dylan later in the year. He's going to be 85. So Nick's going to be the young guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
while people like Nick and Bob are still around, I'm still a kid. I'm still one of the kids.
that's right. Me too. Me too. Have you ever done a solo tour?
I did on the Little Bruises album. Yeah, I did. I did a UK solo tour. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Australia is open for Gary Kemp if you want to come down here.
Well, my brother-in-law's down in Sydney, and so it was great to see him when I went down with Nick, and no, I always love being in Australia. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's good to. It was good to see you down here with Nick. Hopefully, some of those 2025, 2026 Nick shows might be an encore performance for Australia, and if not, Gary Kemp live. We want that tour down here.
Thanks, Paul.